Once upon a time, we as a people lived in a lot better harmony with all of nature than we tend to do now. We've gotten a bit disconnected. Today, we're going to revisit that in a big way. Welcome to another episode of Exploring Possibilities, where week after week we help you transform life from the inside out in holistic spiritual ways. You can find us on all the popular podcast platforms, as well as YouTube on my channel, so check us out. And drop by my website at journeyofpossibilities.com and show us a little support for this show, won't you? It's journeyofpossibilities.com/support. And joining us in just a moment, Jacquelyn Elaine. Mario, your work has taken a new direction lately that's pretty exciting. Tell us about it.
Thank you, Cheryl. One of the things that I do is remote support. And what does that mean? It's like I can train you on your website if you're needing to do some updates. I have a client of mine that they call me every so often and I remote into their computer, and for 2 hours I show her how to do something on WordPress, on Wix, or maybe Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, or even your email. And I have another client that I work with, and they're having issues with their computers, and I troubleshoot, like if Microsoft Word doesn't open or they can't get to a website. And sometimes I'm just doing maintenance. I check their backups to make sure everything's working. I verify that the passwords are working properly, their emails working properly, virus scan, all of that remotely. I don't even have to go to your house. And during this whole lockdown, it keeps me safe, keeps you safe. And why not give it a shot? You can contact me at mariorosales.com and let me know how I can help you.
A widely traveled New Zealander, Jacquelyn Elaine is an artist and educator who's been involved in a broad range of metaphysical studies for nearly 50 years. She's the author and illustrator of The Children of Gaia and scribe to This World of Echoes. And she has also got a new book out, which is the purpose for her joining us today. Her book is called Deva, Our Relationship with the Subtle World. What a read it is. You can pick up a copy with a link right here on this podcast, and that will give a small gratuity back to us in support of the show as well. So please do that. You can learn more about today's guest on her website, jacquelynelaine.com. And she joins us today from New Zealand. Hi, Jacquelyn.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
My great pleasure, Cheryl. Thank you for having me on your show.
I feel like I already know you. I have a little bit of an advantage over you because I've read your book. What a great read. We've never talked about this topic on the show before, but my awakening path has been kind of through the shamanic practices, and I was noticing all the overlap as I worked my way through your book. Everyone at one time understood better that we are all connected, the connectedness that we have to the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. And you do a beautiful job in your book of talking about the spirit of everything. That's kind of what Deva is in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, I think of it more as, I know it's a sort of a hackneyed term these days, but it's the intelligence in nature, or it's the intelligence in matter, but it's not just matter in terms of solid stuff, it's matter in terms of subtle matter as well, and that gets pretty complicated. But so let's start with perhaps a definition of what Deva is. It's actually a Sanskrit word, and that's why it's normally pronounced Deva. It's like the Maori E or the Italian E. It's not an E, it's an S sound, so it's kind of goes into the A. So Deva is a Sanskrit word from ancient India, and it means literally being of light or beings of light. And because of that definition, it's known in the Western parlance as the angelic kingdom. Now, we mustn't have people thinking that that's just talking about the angels of religion. It's not. It may include some of the angels of religion, but it's meaning that there is a kingdom of light that is parallel to our kingdom. It's said to be more highly advanced than the human kingdom, so it's evolved a little, quite a bit further than we have. And because it's to do with the light within matter itself, it has great implications for us as human beings and our physical bodies and our emotional bodies and our mental bodies. And most of us don't kind of think of ourselves in terms of having these different bodies. We just kind of think we're just one personality. And we are, of course, and hopefully an integrated personality. But the implications of understanding that there is this intelligent light in all things, including the tiniest bit of an atom, which of course is way too low for us to kind of communicate with, and we shouldn't be trying to go that low anyhow. But from, this term intelligence and matters kind of got a bit skewed. And I think what we ought to understand is that if there was no intelligence even in an atom, nothing would actually work. I think about it like this, if a hydrogen atom didn't know how to be hydrogen and an oxygen atom didn't know how to be an oxygen atom, we wouldn't get water when the two of them joined together. So it's the dance kind of starts right there, the dance or the song, and there's a lot in the book, as you know, Cheryl, about song, because everything that has a vibration to it just by the mere fact that it is. And that song within the atom is joining with the songs of other atoms, and everything is singing if we could only hear it. I actually have done a book trailer on that theme. It's just a quickie and only takes a minute, and people can see that on my YouTube channel, which is called Tall Pixie. And Tall Pixie, it's a kind of a joke against myself because I am not tall. And anyway, Tall Pixie is an easier way for people to remember my name if they're trying to find my website and can't think how to spell Jacquelyn because it's a little different. So if they remember Tall Pixie, they'll find me.
Well, you covered a lot in there. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on that you mentioned briefly is the song of everything. So just the concept that these beings of light, as Deva, thank you for correcting my pronunciation, as Deva represents beings of light in Sanskrit, light is also color because of the spectrum it can be broken down and reassembled into, and then sound is the same. So the song is the same as the light. So there's multiple ways that it can be experienced and understood.
Yes, exactly. And where different people are better tuned into one or other of those things, some lucky people get all of it. Mm-hmm. Some people are more watery in their makeup and they relate better to some kinds of stimulus than others. Others see light, others hear sound. The first time that I heard the sound of light was in a meditation in Australia way back in the early 90s when I was at an Aurosoma gathering, one of their courses. I don't know if you're familiar with Aurosoma, very interesting colour healing system. And I was sitting there meditating with the rest of the group, and I was very aware of the light that was being emitted by the group meditation. And then suddenly I realized I could actually hear the sound of that light at the same time. It's quite an experience when we can get that double thing. There's a wonderful author called Stuart Pearce who wrote The Alchemy of Voice, and he's based in the States these days, and he grew up, he has what's called synesthesia. I mentioned him in my book. And synesthesia apparently is where people experience sound and light and colour simultaneously. So maybe it's something that we have as we've kind of evolved into emotional beings and mental beings. Maybe we've forgotten how to be that or do that. I'm not sure.
Probably. We've forgotten a lot of things, but I think that's why these books are so inspiring and important right now. So there's so many different directions that we could go in this conversation because your book is just filled with valuable information. But I want to make sure that I bring to the forefront some of the practicality of this. This is not I think the reason that I haven't explored this topic before on the show is because it hasn't been presented in a way that was so tangible for today. And there's so many uses for this. I'll just throw a story out there to jump in. So Mario and I were actually going to trim a tree recently, and we got busy doing other things, and that work did not get done that day. And I was already in the process of reading your book, and I got to the part about the trees, and I began to really understand when you talk about the energy that fills everything and how we can work with say this tree and go out there and give a lot of gratitude to the tree for all the service that it's been and all the shade it's provided and the joy that it brings to my land, and then let it know why I need to trim this one branch off and give it time to pull its energy from that branch. And of course, you're going to explain it better than I am, I'm sure, or fill in where I'm not doing it justice. But as it pulls give it time to pull life out of that branch so that when I go and cut it, it doesn't hurt the tree. That's just a small example of how beneficial this information is for us.
Yeah. And, I have a particular addiction to trees, I suppose you could call it. Fortunately, it's my only addiction. But yeah, it's, apart from art. And yeah, that's in the book. I describe a couple of incidents where trees scream and a few minutes later you hear the chainsaw.
Yes.
And they definitely able to pick up intention. There was a lot of interesting work done on that way back in the 60s and 70s. But I've found that if you warn them first and they can and ask them, say, look, I'm going to trim this branch, and this is why, and please pull your energy down into the roots. It works really well, and they do it really fast. That you can feel them pulling that energy out of that branch or whatever it is really quickly. And if a tree has to be cut down, and there are stories about that in the book as well.
Yes.
Then I like to give them at least 24 hours notice so that they can retreat. Now, recently, there have been some very interesting books come out about trees and forests and the relationship between trees and fungus and all those kinds of things. And it just amplifies what we're talking about here in a scientific way. So I love it when the science comes in to support what we've already found out by other means.
Absolutely.
And the scientists are saying that actually they have discovered that the roots are equivalent to the brains of the tree, and that when a tree naturally dies, often in a forest, in a natural setting, other trees around that stump will actually continue to feed the stump. And of course, now I've recently done a workshop down here in the South Island of New Zealand last weekend, and one of the ladies that attended that workshop was very, very well versed on fungi, and she was explaining to me and to the group the intricate nature of fungus and how reliant we are on it, and how it works with the roots of the trees, and how essential it is to life on Earth. So yeah, it's just yet another demonstration at a physical level of how interconnected everything is. And as you say, what the Deva and our interest in Deva does is help us to realize that interconnection is not just physical, but it's subtle, and it's at every level of being. And we've just cut ourselves off from that so much. It's really startling.
It really is. And you've already touched on the next thing I wanted to make sure I talked with you about. I absolutely loved the section on fungi, and I have worked with mushroom. I mean, they're one of my favorite foods for one thing, but I've also worked with mushrooms in shamanic ceremonies for healing.
Oh,
And
of course. Yeah.
that was so interesting when you talked about so I guess we need to back up now and talk about Deva again. So we're not talking about little beings with faces and funny little clothes, although if we need to put those on them to imagine them, we can. But as you say, we tend to put human-like attributes to everything we don't understand. But so this overlighting Deva that is over all of the fungi kingdom, right, would be the one that you were talking about as this grand being that was willing to. Well, I'll let you tell it because you do it so much better about.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. It took me a long time to actually make that connection. And I think the reason it took me a long time is that I was kind of thinking of fungi as the actual, I think the scientists call it the fruit, which is the mushroom we see popping up, or the toadstool, or whatever it is.
Right.
But so I was kind of concentrating not on the essence of what the fungi Deva actually was. We should explain here, Cheryl, I think, for people, otherwise it's going to be really confusing. When we talk about Deva, we're talking about everything from what we understand as small elemental beings, the intelligence within atoms, as we've said, the intelligence of an entire plant, and then we get up to a level where we come into the folklore of nature spirits, fairies, elves, that kind of thing. And you're right, what we do tend to do is to see them as kind of personified, because our brains can't really make sense of something that is just light, and yet it's communicating with us. So we naturally see it. Our brain interprets that as, oh, there's a person-like thing there that I'm communicating with. It's communicating with me. But above that level of nature spirits, we've got higher Deva as well, who are the intelligence that govern the patterns and, if you like, the blueprints of plant species. And then above that again, you've got the huge Deva of planetary systems like oceans, climate, weather, etc. So when we're talking about the fungi Deva here, I'm not talking about a little elf or a little nature spirit that's associated with a particular fungi. I'm talking about the higher, much higher, overlighting being that is, if you like, supervising and coordinating the entire, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not sure of the terms, the genus or the bigger species of fungi generally as a category of life form. So I think I made my mistake by concentrating on the bit that attracted me, which was the beautiful toadstools and the lovely ones red with white spots and the gorgeous. Like, we've got one here, by the way. I don't know if you saw it during your visit here, but we've got one here that is sky blue. It's absolutely incredible, and mostly in the south. I've never seen it in the North Island, although I believe it's there. But anyway, you can see a drawing of that on my website. So once I realized that what I needed to do was actually forget about these beautiful forms of fungi, which are the kind of fruit of the fungi, I needed to go into the fungus as an entity itself at a very much higher level. And that's when I got it. And that's when I was really, really touched by the enormity of this being and the sense of sacrifice that, here's this being of light that comes down into the darkness of the soil. Now, the dark places are not the only places that fungi live, but there was this sense of sacrifice, of giving up the light to serve down here in the much darker realms and in the deep places of the earth and in the roots of trees, etc.
Yes. The way you talked about it in the book and some of the things that you said about mushrooms, which really also spoke to the way I've worked with them as plant medicine, as sacred plant medicine and ceremony, because they will kind of help navigate between, in the shamanic realm, there's upper world, middle world, and lower world. So going into the underworld can be a scary thing in ceremony and whatever to deal with our shadow work.
Yes.
The mushrooms are wonderful navigators for that because, of course, that's their realm, is the underworld. And when you were writing about this Deva, I was like, wow, that explains so much to me. It just gave me chills. It helped me understand how, it gave language to how held I felt, how supported I felt. What a beautiful tour guide, if you will, this plant medicine can be for doing work within that realm. As you said in the book here, and I've got some flags so I can quickly quote some places, the mushrooms are the mediators between form, or what we see as life, and what we call death, or the breakdown of physical form. They're transformative agents of regeneration and recycling. And that's really some of the work that I was doing in my ceremony. So it was perfect to work with them. And you gave me the image of this Deva that is willing to be a part of this underworld and know that as a Deva, that being is the light in a place that doesn't always have the light. And that's kind of our work, I think, here, especially in 2020. We are the light, whether we see the light or not, we are the light, right?
Yes. And, humanity has its own form of darkness, as you know, as you've alluded to in your work. And when we think about the great masters that we all aspire to be, it's their ability to shine that light into the darkness of our own human baseness and what we've still got to learn. That is such a great service to all of us. And I think that if we could understand nature as being this incredible being of service. In some of the esoteric teachings, they talk about the different kingdoms having different avenues of service, if you like. And the vegetable kingdom, which covers all the plant kingdom, of course, is said to be in service to the animal and the human kingdom. And that's pretty obvious, Without the vegetable kingdom, we don't have a life here. And it's just working on this book, which took many years, I learned so much and things clicked into place for me as I explored how to express things. And I learned so much in the last couple of years of the process of this book that I was really quite astonished at how we miss all these interconnections and how so much of our lives are cut off from these interconnections of nature. And no matter what part we start with, it connects us to all the rest.
Yes, that's true. And we can start in our own gardens, or we can start, early in your book, you started with working with the storm. That was a beautiful story about working with the Deva of the storm. And,
oh, yes.
and we've got so many things going on, from natural disasters to, we've just got a lot going on right now, and people starting to garden for the first time. I don't think there's ever been a better time for you to release this book and teach us all the different ways that we can work with the weather systems and weather patterns. We can work with the plant kingdom, whether it's our gardens or our trees, or you even teach us how to connect with the Deva realm, to just, instead of barging around like we own the place and trying to tell everything else what it needs to do in service to us, to just kind of approach it with a curious, open-hearted nature and invite it to connect with us, and then listen and be still and see what happens. And I'm having great success already with hearing plants that I haven't been hearing, or experiencing things in a new way. You really make that available to us in this book.
Well, thank you. One of the first questions, of course, people want to have answered is, how do I see them? How do I talk to them? And particularly in terms of nature spirits and so on. And I've put a fair bit of that both on my website and in the book. But it's a very personal thing. You can't kind of, it's a little bit like saying, I'm trying to think of an analogy. If somebody's a bit deaf, you can't teach them how to hear.
Right.
Or if they're a little bit blind, you can't teach them how to see. We can guide people as to how to contact and communicate with and feel this kingdom all around us, but we can't do it for them, like lots of things in life. So that's why I've given quite a bit of advice in the book as to how people can go about it. But I do find, from a personal point of view, even with all my experience, when I'm spending hours and hours a day on the computer, it kind of numbs me to that world that's out there. So I think, well, gosh, we're really doing it hard for ourselves when we're spending so much time on electronic devices. And during lockdown, and you guys have had a lot more lockdowns than we have, during lockdown, I actually really enjoyed it because it was like going back to the 1980s. Now, some of your listeners are probably quite young in the 1980s. 1980s, I was in my 30s and thoroughly enjoying being an artist and creating books and pictures and things. And what I used to have a lovely life, I realised when I look back on it. I'd go for a walk on the beach in the morning and, there'd be dogs on the beach and people strolling, and then I'd go back to my studio and get on with the artistic tasks of the day and do a meditation before the kids came home from school in the late afternoon. And it was just lovely. And during lockdown, I thought, oh my gosh, what has happened to us in those intervening decades that, we're so frazzled and we're so preoccupied, and there's so much kind of interference that makes it difficult to think straight. And we all need, whether we live in a city or whether we live in the country, we all need time out to actually just sit in some green space or wander in some green space and just realize how beautiful our planet is and what extraordinarily life force there is in the gardens and the trees. And it's not just there. I know we can do it in our houses too, because our houses are made of material and they too have Deva. And there's one of the most interesting chapters I found to write, and I don't know how you felt about reading it, Cheryl, but was the chapter on the Deva that we create.
Yes.
Did you find that interesting?
I did. Please share about that, what you will, with our listeners.
Well, I didn't kind of give it any thought until one of my many trips through Heathrow Airport. I was just sitting and I had so much time to spare. It was like 6 hours, just sit in the chair. And I was just minding my own business and people watching and kind of being very relaxed. And all of a sudden, I was aware of this sense, and it kind of came upon me. And I realized that it was a very, very great presence, and it was the Deva of Heathrow Airport. And this Deva is the intelligence, if you like, that has been created, or I don't know that created's the right word. I struggle with that concept in regard to these particular things. I suspect, and I've got a lot more work to do on researching this, but I suspect that in a situation like the Heathrow Airport, it's a combination of our input as human beings, our intention, our use of the materials. We've got, in that instance, we've got buildings, we've got planes, we've got systems of luggage control, people control. We've got this enormous interchange and interaction of materials, intentions, and different levels of consciousness and brain power, and needed to create this really, really efficient system, whether it's an airport in the USA or in Britain or wherever it is. But Heathrow is a particularly busy airport, as many of you will know. And it was the most incredible being because, well, it is the most incredible being because it was holding in its consciousness everything that was going on in the airport. And almost like often artists will convey what these big Deva are like as if it's an umbrella, with spokes coming down, spokes of light coming down. And I too have seen it like that, so that they're actually connected. And in a great forest, you'll get the same kind of shape. They're overlighting the airport or the forest or whatever it is, and the elemental life is under their supervision and direction, and it's a feedback system. I think we could think of the parallel as being our bodies, where our consciousness and our brains are kind of in charge, but underneath that level of consciousness, we've got all the body systems which are working away on their own without our interference, because we've actually evolved past having to tell our digestion how to work and our lungs how to breathe. We're still trying to work on our emotional stuff, and our emotional body's still in training, as it were. And that brings up another point, because the emotional body has Deva as well, and they're the elementals of desire. And when we know that, then a lot of things about the crisis that we're at now makes a lot of sense, because we desire, as a kingdom, that's where we're at. And okay, we have a mental body and we're using it, but as a kingdom, we're far more focused in that astral level of desire, which is our emotional bodies. And we don't have to think very far to realize the implications of that statement on understanding the chaos that we've created for ourselves and for the climate.
Well, and even bringing it from that place all the way back to the overarching statement that everything's connected. Never has it been better exemplified than in your book how connected everything is. If we want to make a change, and if we still think that what we feel and what we radiate outward isn't making a change, read your book, right? Because the kingdom is all connected. The Deva are all connected to one another. Everything works together in harmony at the vibration of what we're putting forth. So if we're bringing forth love, and we're bringing forth these positive emotions and these positive intentions, it definitely affects everything else, because it's all connected through this Deva kingdom. And like using your airport analogy, I've been in an airport right after ceremony where I was so wide open, and it was like an angry anthill. Everybody was agitated. All the planes were delayed. It was awful. And it was making my skin crawl. I just wanted to get out of there, because I could feel all of that energy more than usual. And so now you're painting the picture of this overlighting Deva that of course it's all going up into this one overlighting being. So how can we use this information and this greater understanding of our connectivity to bring about the change that we all so desperately want?
Well, I think the clue is in what you just said, that it's how we individually feel, think, conduct ourselves, what's our focus. And, that's a huge challenge. I mean, even knowing it intellectually, it's still a huge challenge even for me. It's very easy to lose our temper with something, or to get irritated. There's a really interesting statement in some of Alice Bailey's books that irritation, basically what she's saying is irritation imperils us. In other words, it puts us in danger. And when we understand Deva the way you and I have been talking about it today, that statement makes good sense. And as you say, when you're open in a psychic and physical and knowing sense, in a place like an angry airport, where it's the people that are angry, not the airport. when you're open to that, it really hits you. And this is obviously one of the reasons that in the past, people who were on the ladder of spirit, joined monasteries or nunneries or, went to live in isolated places is because we sense as we are learning about these things, we sensitize ourselves to so much, and it can become quite overwhelming. So somehow we have to learn to keep our own spiritual integrity while being a force for good in the world, just by being loving and kind and not imperiling ourselves with impatience and anger. And I feel sorry for people who work in airports. Had an incident in Greece where the airport has only been open a couple of days, and flights were being cancelled because of bad weather, and people were behaving very badly.
Yes.
Yeah, I really felt for the people that work there. So, yeah.
Well, this has actually helped me in so many other ways. So I also work with low-income families, many of whom find themselves in crisis right now beyond the crisis that I might think I'm in. And talking to them brings me back to that. Like, wow, I have so much to be grateful for. It's easy for me to get triggered in that place when when I'm interacting with people that are in different states of crisis, and they are bringing those energies, and I notice that it's absorbed into the buildings where we serve people that come in crisis. And again, I saw it as, well, there it is again. It's these different realm of Deva at work that it's all connected. So it's got to go somewhere, right?
Yeah. And when you live in a house for a long time, it becomes a part of you, and it has its own personality. And the old houses in places like Britain and Europe, they have their own Deva. And, say hello to your house when you come home and say goodbye to it when you leave. Treat it a little bit like a person, and it will reward you.
I love this. This is a great conversation. We've gone from trees to houses to mushrooms. And that's the way it is in your book. We cover all kinds of things. We didn't get to half of it. We didn't talk about the storms. We didn't talk about the rocks. I wish we had all day to talk about this. What was your favorite part of the book to write? Was there one?
I think writing about the trees, I always like to write about the trees, but I think also the part about the god Pan.
Oh, yes.
Because I've had such an intimate connection with him, particularly when I wrote The Children of Gaia. He was definitely sort of there overseeing that book. And he's such, I say he, because that's the way we think of it. I don't like to say it seems so rude.
Right.
Has such a huge impact on our world. He kind of binds everything together in the earth, and those parts. But all of it, I enjoyed all of it. Some bits I struggled with, obviously, because you don't put a book of this breadth together without some struggle at times.
It didn't come through as struggle. It all came through as fabulous. So thank you for sharing your life's work with us in this powerful book. I've enjoyed visiting with you about it today, and do hope to make it back to New Zealand and actually meet you. I can't believe this came into my path right after I left and we didn't get to meet, but we'll get to that next time.
We will. And I normally do lots of travel, so you never know, and you're very welcome.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Well, I'd like to ask you if you have a parting thought to leave us with today.
Yeah, I would. Even though things are pretty chaotic in lots of parts of the world, and in yours, no doubt too, just take time every day, if possible, just to be in some kind of nature, or if you're in lockdown and have to be at home, tune in to what the building feels like. Tune in to what's been created there and how you can positively influence that, because you're connected with every single thing, every part of the air. Stand with your feet on the soil at some time. Learn Qigong. Learn to bring those energies together inside of you and to give the energy back out again in the way that you would want to feel it returned.
That's a beautiful message. Thank you so much for that and for all that you bring to us and share with us. Thank you for everything. Thanks for being with us today.
And thank you, Cheryl.
And thank you for joining us for the show. Let us know what you thought at journeyofpossibilities.com and show us a little love while you're there. And be sure to join us next time for another episode of Exploring Possibilities.